So maybe 6 years ago, there was one person who started coming regularly to Long Beach Meditation. I don't think it was Eric, but it was maybe somebody like Eric, because he brought a friend with him. So that could have been Brad, right? So anyway, he came and he sat for, maybe 4 months, pretty regularly, and his friend came with him and sat with him, and then his friends started quit coming. So, after maybe a month or so, I didn't think much about it, but finally I asked it, I said, well, where's John? He's not been here for a while. And he said, well, he said, he quit coming because he said he thinks your talks are too psychological. I thought that was really fascinating, and I love that, because some people would actually say that my talks are pretty fairly not psychological. But this guy said they were too psychological, and some people would say my talks are psychological. Today, I'm going to give you a little bit of a psychological talk, just in honor of this guy. Right? And so I wanted to set it up in 2 or 3 different ways. I'm not really in a Dharma talk mode yet. So some part needs to settle down. The child part of me, by the way, the child part of me, when we do an all day, says, why aren't people looking at me? And then I say, I told them not to. And then it says, oh. That's psychological, by the way. The child part of me saying, why aren't people looking at me? That's psychological. That's not necessarily what I would call metaphysical or spiritual. So I wanted to say, first of all, if we were going to begin with a kind of a thesis statement, I'm going to do this little talk on the 27th about Carl Jung. And I profoundly believe that that there's a gap between Buddhism and psychology that's never been bridged, not yet. And there are many arguments that they are coming together, and then there are arguments that they're not. And I would say that they definitely have not at this point. There's a gap between the two, and we live really in an age where they continually move towards each other. Buddhism has always been able to morph into a culture and really take on that culture. It did that in Tibet. It did that in China. It did that in Japan and Korea. It hasn't really done it yet here. And you have Western psychotherapists who are becoming Buddhist teachers, and your Buddhist teachers are becoming Western psychotherapists. But there's a dividing line that's quite stark, although rarely is it acknowledged. And that's kind of like what I want to talk about. And with not a great deal of inclination to do it. That's called resistance. So when we were doing the beginner's course the last Saturday, and I sort of emailed Caesar and said, well, we have 2 or 3 different things that we could do. We could do the 5 hindrances. We just started this idea of what it means, investigation means, in terms of mindfulness. And then I said, another possibility is we could do an acronym R.A.I.N. So we decided not to do that. And it just kind of popped into my head that I wanted to talk about that. because it's a kind of a extremely helpful. And so then I got this note, right, and I liked it a lot, a question. And so it kind of matches with, with what I wanted to talk about. So the person said, when the meditation began, there was a loud truck outside. I could feel the irritation, then relief when it stopped. It started again, unnoticed, but as soon as it was noticed, there was again irritation. It made now feel uneasy. And the question is, what is that? How do we work with that reaction? Did anyone feel any irritation when you heard any sounds outside? Did anyone feel any irritation today? Forget sounds. So how many people felt a moment of irritation today? I will cop to it. There was one. Somebody felt irritation today. Irritation with, you could be irritated with yourself, right? That's a good one. Why the hell can I do this? So the acronym R.A.I.N is extremely wonderful. And it ends with N, the letter N. It's R.A.I.N. And the last one, the N, is by far the most difficult. That's kind of like what I wanted to talk about today, the N part, which is, we'll get there in about 3 hours. And the N part we'll get to. And that is where we get to what I consider to be this tremendous gap between Buddhism and psychology. If you don't agree with me about there is a great gap between Buddhism and psychology, you should just let me convince you otherwise. But it'll take a while. I'll have to do that later. It is true, though. I mean, it's like you talk about, to some extent, Buddhism says, well, meditation is the only answer, but if you're screwed up in your mind, go to a therapist first, and when you get well, then you come back to meditation. That's sort of the Buddhist view. And then, of course, the psychologist's view is, well, wait just a minute. There is the self. There is a real self, and so, but you go to that meditation to calm yourself down, so that you can do it. So some people felt irritation today, and the R part of R.A.I.N is recognize. You recognize something. You recognize, so you're listening to you're sitting here having a lovely sit, and suddenly there's this sound that comes, and you feel irritation, which was good. I mean, this person who wrote the note, they felt that. They felt irritation. And that would be recognized. That would be perception in terms of the 5 skandhas. The second one is the hardest of all. No, it's not the hardest. They're all the hardest of all. The second one is acceptance. So, if you feel irritated, if you feel suddenly irritated, and you recognize that, you notice it as irritation, how do you accept it? How do you learn to accept what you're experiencing? To some extent, it's like, if you're starting at the beginning, it's like after you have practiced for 45 years, 50 years, and you have patience and you have equanimity and you have all of these good things that come, acceptance slowly comes. But at this point, it's like, maybe the best you can do is just say this is irritation, rather than judging it, rather than pushing it away. You acknowledge that that's what you're feeling. You feel irritation. So, I'll skip on just for a minute. I think that acceptance is very difficult, and I'm not going to. I don't want to. I think we could spend like the talk on acceptance, but I just want to get a little bit on to where we're going. But I just wanted to say, obviously, acceptance is extremely, it's very advanced. All of this is very advanced. So we start out in the beginning, and we hear all of these things, and my God, they're very advanced, and so they're, someone tells us, that we need to be able to do this. Someone was talking about equanimity. It was in an interview, and they were talking about that their practice was equanimity. And I said, what? Your practice is equanimity? I mean, equanimity is an enormous accomplishment, So, so to be sitting there, you're practicing it, it's like, oh, well, that's very good. So what is irritation? Let's investigate irritation for a minute. What is irritation? What's underneath irritation? Anybody have an idea what's underneath it? Yeah?
Not getting what you want.
Well, even that's conceptual. I mean, that's true. That's exactly right, But not getting what you want would be the cause of it. That's not what it is, though, right? You've diagnosed the cause. So I was watching, I'm slowly beginning to enjoy this, by the way. I was watching, well, it's interesting, it's like, I woke up this morning and I didn't want to come. It's true. I woke up at 5 a.m. and the first thought I had was, oh my God, I cannot do this today. That was my first thought. I recognized that thought. I did. I recognized it, and I came up pretty soon with "It's your mind, stupid," which is another an acronym. So I was watching the Donald Trump. I think it's in Utah. I think it was in Utah, and they were just like what? 5,000 people outside, 10,000 people. I mean, there were signs, races, and, blank you. And, I love America. I love America. I mean, this is amazing. It's amazing. And that's like, what is that? It's called anger. It's called anger. Isn't that what irritation is, really? Irritation is a nice word. I was just so irritated. But of course, we all know that the Buddha said that the mind is conditioned by greed, hatred, and delusion. So hatred is like anger somewhat metastasized, right? Anger goes to hatred. When I was watching TV last night with those people, it looked a lot like hatred to me. Your side is awful. It's bad. It's vile. It's ugly. It's evil. Your side is bad. It's ugly and evil. That also means that my side is okay, right? I'm on the side of good, right? So, I mean, this is really, come on. It's just the truth. It's the truth of the world that we live in. Everywhere we look, we see really hatred. I mean, you could talk about, the ISIS. I mean, that's pretty clear. But, I mean, it's everywhere. It's amazing. So, if we gussy it up and, we'll just call it. Here's another one that I have here quite often as a therapist. I used to just love this. I was really frustrated. That's a great word, right? I was frustrated. Now, what does frustrated? Frustrated may be like, is that a little bit worse than irritation or less than? I don't know. But again, it's a word for anger. That's what it really is. Little children, when they're frustrated, they're actually angry, And, like maybe mommy and daddy teaches them to say, if they're good at mommy and daddy, just say, what is that? Frustrated. What do you feel when you're frustrated? I feel angry. So, irritation, frustration. How about upset? I was really upset. This made me. I was at Vaughn's, right, standing in line. Someone was so rude, it really made me really upset. It's anger. What is our problem with anger? So there's where we have to go, really. So that takes us from recognition of irritation. There was this bad sound out there, and I was I was really into it, right? And there's this kind of like non-angry person. And then all of a sudden I felt this irritation. And so then you recognize that as irritation. If you investigate it, what is this? What is irritation? What is it? It's anger. It seems to me, as I said with people, I just think we're all so angry. I mean, this seems to be epidemic to me. It really does. And in some ways, it seems to me that people who know they're angry are better off, in a way, because at least they know where they're starting from, right? They know that they're starting from anger. Then we have to deal with all the passive aggressive people in the world who are punishing you. They don't know they're angry. Right? That's all over the place too. So there's this tremendous anger, that I think is denied. So I just wanted to say that the I part, to some extent, is your ability to investigate the irritation, and then you investigate it, and you investigate, and you stay with it. What is this? What is this? You're willing to stay with it, and you begin to really see, just anger, And then if you really see anger, then how far down does it go, Is there any hatred in there? Is there any hatred in that anger? Well, no, there can't be, right? Because it's not allowed. We can't feel that. It's too awful. And yet, the world, if we look outside, we look at the world, we see incredible hatred everywhere. And in this country, we're just two sides, this side and that side. And it's very unusual to find someone who is able to, Jung called it the tension of the opposites, but to be able to hold those two sides and not split off and to say this side is bad and that side is good. So I asked you all, when we were doing standing meditation for 15 minutes, so I said, it may happen to you as you're standing that you may have a thought. Right? You may have a thought while you're standing. It's amazing. It's an amazing thing, right? You may have a thought. And I said, so if you do have a thought, maybe you could note it. Maybe you could say, thinking. So how many people were able to have to be aware they had a thought, and then they said, thinking. I would say that mostly, if you're me, and most of you are me, and I am mostly you, we don't notice thinking. We don't stop and say, thinking. That's much harder than to recognize irritation. Irritation, at least, you feel it. It grabs you in your body, right? And so if you're really practicing mindfulness, you can say, ooh, irritation. But to notice thinking is a whole nother ballgame, and I think it's really quite extraordinary and important in terms of our practice and what we're trying to do, where we're trying to go. To be able to recognize that you're thinking is just amazing. It's like we do it. What was it K-Drup said, right? It's the good thing about now is it happens. It keeps happening. The good thing about thinking is it keeps happening. It happens constantly, right? It doesn't stop. So what's the problem with recognizing it? What's the problem with recognizing thinking? Clearly, something is not very interested in recognizing. Something is not recognized, is not interested in recognizing thinking, let alone investigating it. So if you investigate it, just as you investigated irritation, so you investigated irritation, and you came to this idea, you saw that there is anger. And if you then can go on with the investigation and if you go to the next level of anger, you'd have to look at what is it that's angry? What is angry? What is angry? When you're angry, what is angry? When I'm angry, what is angry? What is angry?
Non-acceptance?
Huh?
Non-acceptance?
Well, again, you people are so you're all very that's very good, but what is it that's not accepting?
Reality?
No, but what is it over there that doesn't accept reality? What in that black, those black pants and that black nice t-shirt?
Eagle?
Okay, so now we go to this place where what is the ego?
Delusion.
Delusion. You all are so smart. Everybody's too smart for me today. Tara Brock has this wonderful phrase called, it's really wonderful, and I'm jealous of it. I'm jealous that she did that, because I never thought of it. She calls it the trance of unworthiness. Do you know that as Tara Brock? It's a wonderful phrase. We walk around with a trance of unworthiness.
Oh, I like that.
Well, I'm going to give you another one. I think that we walk around with this, with all of this thinking, and we're not able to investigate it. We can, we recognize it as thinking, we see thinking, but if we go down below it, try to recognize it, to investigate it. I think that we walk around with the trance of me. We're all kind of stuck in this trance of me. It's like a trance. And it is from that me that comes the thought. And it is that me that comes the anger. It is that me, that trance of me that comes, as Cindy said, delusion. So this is where, so I think that psychology and Buddhism still are not together. Buddhism will talk about transcending the ego. That's a very good Buddhist thing, right? Sadhana is transcending the ego. And those are very fancy words, aren't they? And I think that the truth is, we split off so long ago from this me, from this little me, this core me. Everyone in this room, with accepting me, I don't include myself now, everyone in this room was a baby at one time. Even Robert was a baby. It's hard to believe, right? Because you're so grown up now, right? Everyone in this room was a little baby. And that little baby was a me. It wasn't an ego. An ego is actually something that develops over time, actually. In fact, I mean, psychologically speaking, it develops. And, but that me, that core me, that when it was lying in a crib and it was hungry, it turned bright red and it started screaming. Right? Food. It was hungry. And it screamed, it cried, Have you ever seen a baby crying because it's hungry? I mean, you want to talk about me, And that's the only way. It doesn't have words even. A baby can't even say, I'm hungry, Mama, right? It just cries. And that's really the core, that's the very beginning of me, is that, is that in this core baby, with no words. First of all it can do is cry. For what? For comfort, for help. It cries for someone to nurture it, to feed it. So this is where I think that to some extent we get a little bit, off balance, because there's this little me part has been so I guess I would just use the word split off. We've split off from it. We split away. We split it because it's kind of like, I mean, imagine right now if we're sitting here with in touch with that me part, that me that says, what about me, right? Maybe it's too painful. So we put pretty words on it, words like ego or words like superego, and then we've got to transcend that. We've got to, and we've got to, teach it not to be attached, to teach it not to be greedy. And personally, sitting with people, as I have sat in terms of therapy for many years, what I have seen over and over and over is that a person who can't get back to that needy me, they're pretty much stuck. And they can skip over to what we call spiritual bypassing, and they can skip over to like a wonderful meditation thing, where you get calm. It doesn't necessarily reach that deep part of us that is so relentlessly focused on me. What about me? As I said, so I've got this little part that's saying, why aren't they looking at me? All right? Why aren't they looking at me? Why aren't these people looking at me while we're sitting and meditating? Now all of a sudden I had to realize, oh yeah, you told everybody to put their eyes down. So I think that this is part of investigation. Recognize, right? Investigate. Recognize, accept. Thinking. You sit and you recognize, and then you accept that this is thinking. You accept it. You don't run away from it. You stay with it. You accept that it's thinking. Perhaps then you note it. Thinking. That's acceptance. A lot of times we don't. The reason why we're not sitting there noting it as thinking is because we're not in acceptance. Right? We're not even willing to stay there. So if we go on and we recognize that we're thinking, we accept that we're thinking. Then the investigation is, what is that? Where is that coming from? There's a me in every single thought, I think. It's time to I'm going to go to the bathroom. I'm going to go have a cup of tea. I'm tired. What thought did you have while you were sitting that didn't have me in it? That's not a bad thing. It's not bad at all. In fact, it's normal. It's natural, right? It's natural. The problem is that if we are so separated from it, if we're so separated from that sense of me, that need to be seen, to be heard, to be loved, to be validated. If we're separated from that need because it's not acceptable, then it's just going to run on and on and on and on and on. The end part of R.A.I.N, and that would be like the where we go, like more what we say Buddhist, I would think right now, as opposed to what I would call psychological. The end part is non-identify with that. Non-identify with that little me. But what does that mean, to not identify with the me inside? What does that mean? To deny it? To say, well, you're not real. This is not real. Do you think that's going to help the little baby part inside? Say, well, honey, you're not really real. So, or, think about that, right? So non-identification is where I think we can really get into some difficulty in terms of growing. Because the truth is that me has to grow. The problem with some ways in Buddhism that we look at this me is that we have to, I don't want to say get rid of it, but we say it's a delusion, it's an illusion, it's not real. That's very good for how do you think the me feels when you tell it it's not real or it's a delusion, right? But the problem is that we tend to have this idea that we have to get rid of it, that it's causing all the problems, right? And so you just have to get rid of it, as if you could get rid of something that you were born with. The very idea, it's like saying, okay, I'm going to get rid of me and my body. Well, that comes close to suicide as far as I'm concerned. So isn't it likely that what we need to do is to be in touch with it, to accept it, to see it, and not to judge it, not to get rid of it? If there's hatred, if you have hatred, well, I'll say if I have hatred, if there's hatred, does it get better by judging it and saying, well, that's really bad? Does that help? I said to a client yesterday, the day before yesterday, you can't change anything that you can't love. It's not possible. It is not possible to change anything that you can't love. You can't change a child if you can't love that child. The child will know it. It'll know it in a nanosecond, right? You can't change a dog if you can't love it, right? You can't change anything if you can't love it. Because anything changes because it's nurtured. It changes because it feels safe. Right? It feels safe and it's nurtured. And then it can sort of maybe let go. Maybe. Right? So if I'm putting Buddhism on, and this is unfair, by the way, and I don't mean it. I'm always guilty of hyperbole. It's one of my strongest suits. If you judge this little self inside as being inferior or bad, or whatever the pejorative you want to put on it, how the hell is it going to change? How are you going to change if you judge yourself? It's not possible. And I've been doing this for many years, and I have seen people so wanting to change out of a kind of a constricted self, And actually even like letting go of anger. So wanting to let go of being angry. The one thing they're not really able to do is to love that angry part. That's the hard one. They're not able to do that. They, we, me, all of us. So we rather go to a religion because, it's, be loving, be kind. I got an email from someone, wonderful meditator, just last week. And he said, you know, I've noticed in my, and he's sitting like, oh my God. I mean, it's like very impressive. He said, I noticed, he said that I'm fairly kind of harsh on myself when I sit. He says, I'm really not that nice to myself. So he emailed me and he said, maybe, he said, do you think I should send myself loving kindness? And then the next thing he said was, he said, if so, he said, could you give me some instruction about sending loving kindness to myself? And I wrote him back and I said, don't ask me how to do it. Jokingly, how do you send loving kindness to that little part of yourself that you don't like? May you be happy and safe from harm and go to hell because I don't like you. I mean, how do you send loving kindness to yourself when you don't like yourself? Is anyone got an answer for that? And the truth is, we almost no one likes themselves. Do you like yourself, Cindy? No, I know you. How do you send loving kindness to something you don't like? Oh, I know why you do it. Because it'll change. You know, I've got to change this, so may I be happy and safe from harm. It doesn't work. It won't work, I promise you. You can give the next 40 or 50 years to it, but it will not change. If there is that little part inside that cried and needed and was angry and could feel envy. Does anyone ever have any envy? Do you know what envy is? Do you know what envy is? People confuse envy with jealousy. Someone told me recently, she said, you know, I was going to a performance of this artist, and she said, I was really jealous of her. And I said, well, what does that mean? And she, you know, I said, you weren't jealous of her. And she said, why? What do you mean? I said, you were envious of her. Jealousy is like it's developed. I mean, jealousy means, you know, like, I love you and I'm jealous because you're, you know, coming between us, right? I mean, jealousy is someone's going to take something away from, you know, like someone that I love. Envy is just this pure feeling of lack. I don't have and I'm envious because you have. Envious is just pure, you know, like I could be driving a Porsche and get envious of you because you bought a Ford. If I feel this lack, right? If I feel lacking inside, I'll be envious of anything you have because it really reminds me that I don't have. I'm lacking. What is it inside that feels lack? What feels lack? It's that little baby. It's that little baby that wasn't nurtured. It feels lack. And some babies were nurtured, hopefully. So that's why I was just saying that the whole thing of non-identification becomes very problematic, I think. Because it's like everybody uses R.A.I.N. Everyone talks about it. So I'm going to non-identify with this me that's causing thoughts. Sure. Yeah, that's very good. So I'm going to non-identify with it. That means I'll just sort of like, you know, push it away. And the truth is, maybe, going back to acceptance, maybe the only thing that we can do when we recognize and investigate, maybe all we can do is embrace whatever it is, embrace it. So I'm wondering if there's, if I've said enough. Or maybe I've said too much. So I guess I'm just inviting you all, inviting myself to just sort of hypothesize or posit or imagine that there's a part of you, and there's a part of me that we split off from so long ago, we can't even remember it. It's so long ago. This part that needs, this needy, little, it's little and it's needy, you know. And nobody really likes a baby. I mean, that part of a baby, you know. Who likes the needy baby? Even a mother, right, can nurture the baby. But that there's a part of us that is, we're so separated from that angry, needy part, and then we continually try to improve it. We do meditation. We sit. We try to be calm. We try to be mindful. We try to concentrate. But I guess I'm just inviting you to be open to being in touch with this core needy me, this little me, and just embrace it. You know, just embrace this part of you, because that's the only way it can begin to grow or transform. There's a wonderful expression in psychology called the transparent self. I love that. The transparent self. And I think that in theory, that little thing that we were born with, that little essence of meanness, that me, what is amazing about it, what is really extraordinary about it, is that it is something that can continually grow and forever. Become increasingly transparent, right? It starts out as this little core thing, but it can become increasingly transparent. It can become increasingly large, and that's the point at which some people maybe are extremely developed, you know, in terms of meditation. I mean, that little thing can grow, and it does grow, and some people find, you know, the path of meditation. Maybe the way at a certain point that's a person can, that little part of the self can grow. But I guess what I'm trying to say is that it can't do that if we are applying this judgment on it. You know, if we're putting, you know, again, even back to the thing of non-identification, you know, so that we dismiss it. It's not me. It's not a part of me. That we're just stuck with it forever as long as we do that. We're stuck with this, what our people call the ego, and which I really urge you to stop calling it an ego and just call it a me, because that's what it is. It's just the little me. And there's nothing wrong with it. And it is always capable of growing if you can just love it. If you can learn to accept it and love it. So, the next part of this, after I finish, we're going to start talking about mindfulness to orgasm. So I would just like to suggest to you that more or less, just like the guy who came and said, he said, well, you know, his talks are too psychological. This is psychological. This is psychological. It's not really necessarily something that you'll hear very often, really at a Buddhist retreat. It's not my experience. At a Buddhist retreat, we hear, you know, we hear the word ego. You know, we hear that a lot, and then we hear that we're transcending the ego or transcending the self, but it's never embodied in this baby that we all were. It's never embodied in that, the psychological reality of what we were and what we can become. So Jung says, Carl Jung says, you know, that we are on a path to what he called an individuation, where we become truly, 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 truly an individual. And I think that that's, well, I hope all of us are doing that. Okay, that's the best I can do. Write that.